consuming less because they don't need to consume so much?
Sadly, there is, around the fringes, there's certainly a movement for people doing that, but if you look at the statistics, the number of wears per garment, so the number of times that the average person wears a piece of clothing that they own before they effectively dump it or recycle it, is between 7 and 10 times. It's going down significantly, even in fast fashion. I mean, we're working with the Institute of Positive Fashion, which is part of the British Fashion Council, on the challenge of returns in fashion, and found that of the high volume returners, a significant percentage of them admitted to something called wardrobing, which is, basically I buy it, I post it on social media, or I might even wear it out for the weekend and then I return it because it's easy. So those kind of very bad behaviors are also growing, and arguably potentially faster than the sustainable behaviors.
What about the producers? Let's talk particularly about fashion, where you have got a specialty on all the detail. About the way in which that is developing. You're talking about a significant number who now return their goods. Either they don't fit or for the reasons you've just said. There's also the other part of this, which is the cost of fuel, the cost of delivery, the cost of everything. In other words, people not really being conscious of just how unsustainable this is.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, returns is a very good example of that. And it really accelerated during COVID, where online fashion grew massively. In the UK, online fashion is now about 30% of all fashion, and of that 30% of it is returned. So 1/3 of all fashion bought online is being returned. It's much higher in Germany, closer to 50%. So that, of course, has its own cost to the industry and its own sustainability impact from all of the transport, but also the fact that sometimes this product can't be resold. By the time it gets back to a distribution center and it's processed and cleaned, repackaged, sometimes the product's out of fashion. And in the case of some fast fashion operators, the cost of doing those operations is more than the margin of the product. So it's not really in their interests to even process it and put it back on sale.
But you say that consumer awareness on sustainability is rising, and it is now becoming, and these are your words, a key consideration in the purchase process. So there doesn't seem to be necessarily a joining up here between the reality and volume, but the way you can see a trend changing. What are you seeing and how fast?
So I think there's definitely a dichotomy there with the consumers who are very sustainability conscious, who are driving new business models, and we're seeing things like rental, like resale models, where platforms like Depop and Vinted, where consumers are selling their used fashion online. So we are seeing those changes in terms of circular economy, but the overall value chain is so entrenched, I think, in this take, make, waste, and it really needs to change to a much more circular model. And actually the EU textile strategy, which is not a law yet, but came out earlier this year, and they were absolutely spot on. They said that the fashion industry needs to move to making clothes that are more durable, made from recycled materials, recyclable, that repair becomes the norm, that these models are profitable, because that's the other thing. Of course, fashion brands, grocers, food companies, they're all trying to figure out how to do this in a way that doesn't create a P&L. I mean, that's something that we've been getting a lot of interest from clients, is how can I do sustainability or address the sustainability agenda in a way that's commercially viable? Because in the end, sustainable for a business also means you have to stay in business, you have to continue to make profit.
We're coming to the end. What about, we're entering what is likely to be a brutal recession for a large number of people, whether in the developed or the developing world. Everyone's going to be impacted one way or the other. How much is what you're talking about a function of disposable income? In other words, if people don't have disposable income and the time available to go browsing online or down at the shops, do you think that in its own way, as we saw with fuel during the pandemic and aviation and so on, that will lead to a significant drop?
Yes, definitely the cost of living crisis is resulting in a slowdown in consumption, and particularly in fashion, which is of course much more discretionary than food. So that, I mean, it's a painful way to see progress on sustainability, and not the way that we would want to see it, but in terms of fashion specifically, that will reduce in some muting of demand. Food's kind of essential, so people may well trade down from a more sustainable option to something that's more affordable in the case of food.
Quickly, do you believe consumers will change? Because I come back to that word at the beginning, empowered. Do you think consumers will say, I'm not going to do that?
I think it's not enough to expect consumers to be the driver of this big change. They're hugely influential, but I think it has to be a kind of an amalgam of governments. I mean, regulation and policy is really important. Businesses need to innovate. They need to innovate their business models and innovate in terms of technology. And consumers need to play their bit. And education is important as well in schools, and teaching kids how to repair a product and so on. So it's not just one kind of silver bullet. So consumers will change, but not on their own. It has to be part of that whole ecosystem.
My guess is it's possible. Siobhan, thank you very much indeed. I'm going to feel guilty drinking from my glass or my bottle. And I'd encourage you all, when we meet again in Cop28 in UAE, all come in the same clothes you're wearing now next year. See if that's possible. Thank you all very much indeed. It's coffee time in a which should be disposable but recyclable. I leave you to make a judgment. And if you can't get a cup like that, well, you'll have to make a judgment as to how you consume your water and your coffee. Back in 25 minutes. Thank you, Siobhan.
Thanks, Nick.
Ideas drive us. They inspire, thrill, and challenge us. We at Roland Berger believe that a new holistic model for business and society is essential. We must create sustainable change. And that we, as management consultants, play an active role. We help organizations, companies, and founders to reimagine their